Michael Laidler is a professional speaker, best-selling author, podcast host, and founder of Michael Laidler Unlimited. Michael shares his inspiring journey from law enforcement to becoming a sought-after speaker in leadership development and mental wellness. He openly shares his challenges and triumphs from his early days struggling to secure speaking gigs to his empowered success after joining Toastmasters and the John Maxwell Program. We'll dive into Michael's podcast, LEO First, which seeks to humanize law enforcement officers by sharing their personal lives and their struggles. Michael also provides insightful lessons on the power of personal storytelling, the critical importance of doing free speaking engagements, and how that practice can boost confidence and refine messages. We'll also discuss his best-selling book, Greatness Beyond the Badge, where he highlights the need for self-awareness and self-care, especially in high-stress professions. Whether you're a budding speaker or someone looking to understand the importance of self-improvement and leadership, today's episode with Michael offers a wealth of knowledge. As always, if you find value from this content, please like and subscribe. Now, here's my conversation with Michael Laidler. Enjoy. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond Fulfillment podcast. I'm your host, Dave Goulas, and this week, my guest is professional speaker, best-selling author, podcast host, and founder of Michael Laidler Unlimited, Michael Laidler. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, man, I appreciate it. And this opportunity is always humbling just to get a chance to speak on anybody's podcast. So I'm excited to see where we go with this one.
Okay, excellent. If you could, for everyone, can you tell us what Michael Laidler Unlimited is?
It is a professional speaking business, which entails me giving keynotes, seminars, online courses, all surrounding leadership development, mental wellness, addressing areas like burnout, stress management, time management. Because what I've learned is while we think we know how to do some of these things, a lot of times we don't. And when I started to look at companies and different ways to impact people, I just looked at myself and I was like, you know what? I get burned out. I go through stress. My time management does suck at times. So what can I do to give back? And that's where Michael Laidler Unlimited came from, just offering different in-person virtual services that helps people just get through their day-to-day lives.
Okay. So you talked about stress management there, and you certainly know a thing or two about high stress situations because practically your entire career has been in law enforcement.
Correct.
Yeah, can you tell us, it looks like you got into law enforcement at the age of 19. Can you tell us about your backstory?
Of course. My professional career started at the age of 19 in 2005 in Tallahassee. And throughout that time, I've been a police officer, I've been a Border Patrol agent, I've worked in federal corrections. And it doesn't matter what organization or role I was in, you're right. It was a lot of stress. And when I started to look at how it was impacting me, I had the usual answers of you like, you know what, I'm going to forget about it. Nobody else cares. Maybe I have a couple of drinks to kind of ease the mind. And that's not really the healthy way to go. And as I started to develop myself more and realize, you know what, people are struggling. Like, I don't need to be putting myself in that same situation. So my background is law enforcement, as you mentioned, police officer, Border Patrol agent, federal corrections. And that's been the bulk of my career. Now, I have expanded a little bit as far as with my speaking business. Now, when I go speak at different organizations, whether they're just corporate, nonprofit, non-law enforcement, whatever that looks like. But it's so amazing how at the end of the day, no matter all the career experience I have, especially in law enforcement, that it just boils down to people. And that's what I've learned in the law enforcement industry is that everybody has something going on, and it's a matter of how they're addressing it to overcome it.
Okay. So you're in law enforcement and you have this desire to start a business that's going to help others and deal with this problem that we see it everywhere, right? Stress. So many people everywhere not dealing with stress in healthy ways. Like, how did you go from just being a law enforcement agent to creating to become a professional speaker?
That's actually it's a great question. I get asked that a lot because although we have professionals that have a law enforcement background, not a lot of them go from the government side to the private sector. and they don't offer things like this typically. For me, back in 2015, I had my first opportunity to get an official leadership position. And what I realized is several of the leaders and people that were already in those roles were horrible communicators. They didn't know how to speak correctly. They didn't know how to convey a message. They just didn't know how to structure anything as it related to public speaking or anything that even a one-on-one conversation. And I really didn't want to be that person that had those same attributes and traits as them. I told myself, you know what, there has to be some program or some people out there that focus on this, because that at the time, like I said, 2015, we're talking 9 years ago, I wasn't really paying attention. I didn't really have those resources that I readily knew. So at some point, I can't remember how I found out about it, but there's an organization called Toastmasters. And Toastmasters is an international education program that's designed to help work on communication. Now, they will highlight things like public speaking, leadership, but overall, they talk about communication. Around that time, 2015, 2016, I started in that program, and I was like, oh, I kind of like this. 2017 comes around, and I have a friend that was a Border Patrol agent. Actually, he still is now. And he was in something, he started posting things on social media, like with different cool images and quotes on it. I was like, man, what are you doing right now? And he ended up telling me, oh, I'm in the John Maxwell program. And I was like, the John Maxwell program, I've heard of this guy before. I started to do a little bit of homework on it. And John Maxwell, what he did, he created a leadership company that helped speakers or anybody that wants to create a business on how to be certified coach, trainers, and speakers. And usually my curiosity usually tends to result in me spending money. So I was like, you know what? Let me take this opportunity to go out there and see what this is. And I ended up joining that program 2017. And one of the things that they pushed was, hey, you need to start a speaking program. That was just one of the things they were like, hey, if you're public speaking or you're speaking in any corporation or for any team, you should eventually create a business from it. And later, 2017, October 1st, 2017, I actually founded Michael Laidler Unlimited with those aspirations. So for me, it wasn't like anybody told me to do it. It was more of, I felt the need to work on communication. And like most people probably listening, especially if they're entrepreneurs, sometimes your passion leads you to a business. And that's ultimately what we want from people when they're getting into a business. We don't want to just start something because it makes money. We want to start and do it because we're actually enjoying it. We want to make a difference. And for me, that's what ended up happening to me in that 2 to 3 year period. I said, you know what? I'm actually liking this public speaking, because I'll tell you right now, I didn't really do public speaking before that. I wasn't really one of those that was like, hey, call me. In college, how most colleges in their undergrad program, they require you to take one communication course, usually public speaking. I said, no, 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 no. How can I get out of this? So they had some interviewing course, because all I had to do was talk to somebody one-on-one. And I got my A, and I called it a day on that. So for me, it all started with realizing that I needed help in communication. And then I created my business in 2017. As we sit here today, I've just taken so many other trainings and programs. It's helped me build myself up to become a true professional speaker.
Wow. Okay. So just that desire and that curiosity to improve yourself just led you step by step to ultimately creating the business.
Correct. Yeah. And that's usually how it starts with me. It usually starts with some level of curiosity, and then my pockets and my bank account look at me crazy. And I'm like, you know what? If I get 1 or 2 speaking engagements, I could pay for this training. So usually it's, for me, it's just curiosity.
Okay. So you start the speaking business. What was it like in the early days, kind of landing speaking engagements and getting clients? I mean, did you have any challenges in the early part of your business?
Heck yeah, man! I spoke for free so much my first year, it wasn't funny. You would think that I was going to pay for all the speaking I did, man. Because I like I mentioned, I started my business in October of 2017. And just starting the business up, you're trying to tell people, hey, I got a speaking business. Come hire me. I have a great message. Hey, nobody hires you. Nobody just says, you know what? We're going to bring you in tomorrow. I was confident that they would do that, but that's not really how it happened. So 2017, I want to say I did 2 free speaking engagements, and it was actually 2 mastermind groups, because a buddy of mine from church like, hey, I got a group of leaders and I'd love to bring you in. So that was my initial process of starting it. And then 2018, I actually spoke nearly 20 to 30 times for free. And I actually remember there was one group that I thought I was speaking free for. And the lady was like, "Hey, send me your invoice." Man, I didn't know what to send her. I never discussed payment. For me, I was just trying to get on stage. I mean, I was just trying to do something. So it was pretty cool. I ended up sending her an invoice for 1,500, and surprisingly, they actually paid it. I don't think they were excited to pay it, because come to find out, they weren't really supposed to pay speakers, but the person that was in that role didn't know that. But since she already offered to me and agreed to pay it, it was like, they were like, you know what? That's not good business practice. So for me, it was definitely a slow run in the beginning. And then I do all these free speaking gigs, except for that one. Then in 2019, I switched positions in my full-time job. So I spoke once in 2019. 2020, I didn't do any speaking. 2021, I didn't do any speaking. But in 21, I had an epiphany. I was like, you know what? Why am I not speaking? I pay every year for this LLC. I've taken these courses. I've paid several thousands of dollars for the John Maxwell team. I need to use some of my speaking. So at the end of 2021, I joined a marketing program that's focused on speakers. And some of the stuff they taught me, I definitely use today, but it has allowed me to average anywhere from 12 to 20 speaking engagements, paid speaking engagements every year now. And it's been pretty good. I mean, I still do work. Before your podcast, I was actually doing my what I call, or what I learned is called a power hour, and that's either respond to emails from the day before or outreach, whether it's cold emails or whatever it might be. Because what I've learned is that there's a lot of speaking engagements just in the U.S. From what I was told, it's like 1,500 a day, especially Monday through Friday. So I'm thinking, you know what? If there's 1,500 a day, they all at least need one speaker. I know there's more conferences and events than speakers. So what can I do to go out there and promote myself and market myself? So for anybody that's looking at getting into the speaking game, it is a lot of work and it does take momentum, but it is an everyday grind. You're going to be looking at leads. You're going to be pushing different ways to meet people at least 5 days a week. More than likely, it's going to be 6 or 7, because you're going to be like, oh, I just want to do some work on Sunday, but that's another story in itself. But no, it's been interesting. It's a lot of work, but the lead generation is going up, but it takes momentum. Like I said, back in 2018, I although I was speaking for free, it was more of me just getting out there, me trying to understand my speaking style and understand the game and the business. It wasn't until really 21, 22 that I actually saw I see the momentum now. And even I'm already starting to book out in 2025 already. Like, people are already calling me for next year.
Wow. Okay. So that's interesting. So you kept a full-time job as you're starting this, and you did a lot of free speaking. How important do you think that was in terms of just your overall development and not having to necessarily rush speaking career and taking time to get better and speak on those stages and gain more experience? How important do you think that has been in your journey?
For me, I think it's the required foundation for anybody, any speaker, because it's one thing to be a CEO or a VP of a company that you work for that's not yours. But going out there and speaking on your own topics that you choose, even though it's for free, it's giving you that confidence that, you know what, I can actually go out there and command a crowd. I can work the nerves out, because you're going to be nervous. I mean, every presentation I do, even today, I still have some level of anxiety. And it's not that I'm worried about the message, but I'm always thinking about how I can impact others during my messages, because to me, that's the most important part about speaking. It's not getting paid. It's not traveling to different parts of the country or the world. It's literally, in my 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, 8 hours, how can I change somebody's life with my message? So for anybody that's looking at it, you do have to start free. Even if you have a hookup, you're still going to do some free engagements. We all do. But I think it's a good starting point to just get out there, whether it's your Chamber of Commerce's, your Rotary clubs, your Toastmasters club, church, whatever you feel you're comfortable doing, to go out there and practice your message. Because last thing you want to do is, if you are getting paid whatever dollar amount you think you need to survive, you go out there and drop a zero out there. you're going to be disappointed and you let people down. So the free presentations, the free keynotes, the free seminars is always good to practice your message in an environment that, like you're not like disappointed if you let them down. I mean, you're still disappointed in a sense, but you didn't cost them money as well. So for me, speaking for free is a requirement for every speaker. Like I always tell them you should be doing at least in the beginning 5 to 10 before you start really expecting pay. Now, some people come out the gate making 10 to 15 grand. It's very rare. Usually they were at another company or they got lucky, but most of us will speak for free a lot. Like I told you, my first year, if my 2018 was at least 20 times. And now I do speak free. I have a rule. I speak free twice a year. And usually it depends on the conference and what I believe I can like get from it as far as like practice or networking or exposure. But I've gotten to the point to where I still do at least 2 free or a max of 2 free a year, unless someone's really convincing. But it's extremely important for people to do free speaking, especially early on, so they can practice their material.
Okay. So you still do that just to get more practice in and just to always, I guess, remain humble, so to speak?
Absolutely. There's nonprofits out there. Like, let's say, for example, and I haven't spoken at this, it's just the first one that pops in my head. Like, let's say American Cross, for example. They're like, hey, Michael, we want you to come provide us a uplifting, motivational presentation on how to help people go from fatigue to fulfillment. We can't pay anything, but this would be really good for a certain group of people that can't get that. I will go do that, because to me, that makes sense. Now, I would probably request at least some kind of travel reimbursement, but you just have to see where you're at in life. If you're trying to make this a business, you can't do everything for free. But sometimes it just feels good to speak in front of certain audiences. You know what I mean? Like, it's just one of those that, if I got a chance to speak to this group, I just feel good about myself that I was able to spread a word to them that they probably wouldn't have been able to get in another environment.
Okay. And you mentioned too about making it so much about what you're doing for the audience and what type of benefit they're going to get. Yeah, I was looking at your website and you've got so many testimonials, not only from companies, but people that have just seen one of your speeches and just been inspired and felt compelled to give a testimonial. So like when you see all those, like how good does that make you feel?
Oh, it's that intrinsic reward that you can't measure, because it's one thing for someone to pay you to speak and say you did a good job in those few words. It's another thing when someone actually is willing to put their name on you almost as a reference check, saying, oh, I actually liked what Michael said. I like what Michael did. He performed in this way. And that's why I love testimonials, because it's just a reassurance that I'm doing something right. Like, so I know some speakers, they don't really push for testimonials or even feedback or evaluations. I do, because I am on a ongoing process of developing the material I have, because I know things change and I want to make sure I'm always delivering the best message. So for me, I ask that kind of stuff. I'm like, hey, can I get a testimonial? And most of the time you kind of know already who's going to do it. So you don't just do a blanket testimonial. You do someone that's actually said, you know what, Michael, I like the way you spoke. So you go to that person and say, hey, would you mind just doing written or a video just to say, you did good. Now let me go back to one thing we said earlier. When I talked about the free engagements, when people do free presentations, one thing I recommend, highly recommend, always request a testimonial. Always, whether it's by video, written, or whatever, because your time does count towards something. So if you can get that person say, you know what, I'll come do it for free for American Cross, can I just get a testimonial from you? It's not really costing them anything. It's not costing you anything, but it's one of those things to let you know and validate that, you know what, I actually did something right for this group. So that is something I do recommend. Even if you're doing a free presentation, always, always, always request for a testimonial. That's some of the ones that I have on my website came from free training I offered. And I was like, you know what? If you like the training, it was something good to you, you appreciate it, can you do a testimonial? And most times people will say yes, especially if you delivered something you were passionate about. So for me, those testimonials are valuable, obviously on the business side, but definitely internally as well.
In my world, a personal brand is invaluable. A year ago, Easy DC was brand new with just a couple of customers and no online presence. Then I found Hicks Marketing. They helped me amplify my personal brand, build a solid content strategy, publish my podcast, and 10x the number of customers we serve, all in less than 1 year. Do you need a marketing partner who gets you and cares about your success? Reach out to Alicia at hicksmarketing.com for more info and tell her Dave Goulas sent you. And so many of your programs too, right, are geared towards the law enforcement community. Those are many of the groups and whatnot that you've spoken at. Like, when you look at the state of law enforcement today and you talk about the high stress and helping people, like, how difficult is it to be in law enforcement today with everything we have going on?
Woo! Oh, that's a tough one. That's a tough. I mean, for any person that's deciding or thinking about getting in law enforcement or even staying in it, it is a very high stress environment. Anything that deals with responding to emergencies, whether it's law enforcement, firefighters, EMS, paramedics, nurses, doctors, dispatchers, and I can keep naming it. Anytime you have to respond quickly to anything, it's stressful. Now, when I do my business and I'm doing my cold emails, that's not stressful. I mean, that's not like anybody's going to like stab me or I'm trying to save a life. So for anybody that's looking at anything like law enforcement that has quick responses, high stress levels, understand it is difficult. And that's one of the reasons why I look at things like stress management. And when I talk to other companies, and I do build my programs in a general sense, but most of my clients, given my background, end up being law enforcement. So when I look at things and some of the things I talk about, like when I talk about burnout, it's because in law enforcement, burnout's like an everyday thing. It's not like it's an accumulation of activities, because there's one stat out there that I always reference when I talk about like traumatic events, burnout, stress. In law enforcement, there's a stat that says law enforcement will go through 178 critical incidents throughout their career versus the average person, which will only see 2 or 3. So when I talk to people about stress management, even in other industries, I say, you're going to go through something stressful, but you have to know how to handle it. It's just that in law enforcement, we're just seeing a lot more because we're going to people's problems. If you hear gunshots right now in your current role, most people's role, even my role sitting in my office, I'm not going towards it. But if I'm in a uniform of any level, I'm going towards that fire. So you're always going towards the action in law enforcement. So it is tough, and you have to have that internal desire to want it, because if you don't, you're gonna fall. Like, it's just, you're gonna falter. Like, it's extremely stressful just to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. So now you also wrote a book called Greatness Beyond the Badge. And yes, it was a bestseller?
Yes, on Amazon, yes.
Okay. Yeah, what compelled you to write the book?
In the summer of 2021, that was one of the epiphanies I had that I mentioned earlier. I knew we were going to get to it. That's why I didn't really go too hard. But I was literally sitting in my house that I'm in right now, and I was like, man, I'm not doing too much speaking. And then I started looking around the landscape of law enforcement. I was like, there's a lot of negative press about being in law enforcement right now. I had to sit back and look at why I was in it. Not saying I was trying to leave or nothing like that, but I was like, you know what? What was my desire, my drive to get there? And then as I dug deeper into it myself, I started looking at things like self-awareness. And in law enforcement, and I know this is probably other industries as well, from at least some of the research I've done, we don't spend enough time focusing on ourselves. We always put everything, whether it's friends, family, or organization, ahead of our own needs. So when I started to look at that, I was like, you know what? I need to start speaking about this more, because if I'm suffering through it, at least one other person has to be. And that's where Greatness Beyond the Badge came from. I use that title because, once again, my law enforcement background, and it's relatable to the clients that I mostly serve, but the badge is symbolic of whatever is taking your time that's away from you. And I want people to understand that, whether it's an organization, you're volunteering, even your family, because if you're not the best version of yourself, you can't be the best version to them. So for me, Greatness Beyond the Badge, it was designed for anybody who is struggling with understanding their own purpose, because a lot of us go through our whole life working for somebody else or working for someone else's goals. And it's like, if you don't understand your own happiness, what drives you, what's happening in your life, how do you get to where you need to be, you're not going to be the best version of yourself. You're not going to be that entity that people deserve of you. Greatness beyond the badge is exactly what it sounds like. It's how do you be great beyond something else? How do you go back to us being here one-on-one? Like, how do you do that? So for me, my inspiration was looking at my own life situation and realizing how many other people, how many other entities, how many other organizations I put ahead of my growth. And it was like, how do I take that back? And I took it back by first understanding who I am as far as my failures went, my purpose here, and then how do I become that best version of myself through things like practicing mindfulness and time management.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, that's really interesting too, because we see that so much, right? Where people, they're not in a career or a role that's fulfilling, right? And they're not happy, and it leads to so many other things. So your book really addresses some of that issues in terms of beyond just what you do, like finding out what your purpose is.
Yeah, because you're right. When people say money doesn't create happiness, now I will say I want to make sure that people understand. I don't believe money creates happiness. I still want as much as I can get, but I mean, I'd rather be the person that decides that. But people are truly right. That's why you see people that can make $3 million in a year, and then you still see them going through depression, or you still see them suffering because they're not actually happy what they're doing. They're good at doing something. That is, they're good at e-commerce, they're good at building electric cars, they're good at negotiating, they're good at playing sports, but they're not really happy doing it. So that goes back to how do you develop yourself and make sure you're doing the right thing each and every day. So that's why I wrote The Greatness Beyond the Badge, because it's like, okay, what else can you substitute? Because it's up to the person on what they want to be great in. But the badge is just symbolic for how do you get past whatever is holding you back to being the best version of yourself.
Okay. And another question on the book, like so many people I talk to, that's one of their goals and their ambitions is to actually write a book. And for someone too that was a law enforcement officer and then just went to Toastmasters, led into a speaking career, how did you just write the book?
Oh man, this is another curiosity thing for me. It's curiosity. I'm telling you, I spend so much money because I'm curious. Like I'm at the point where I'm gonna go back to school next year to go get a doctorate just because I want to do my own research out of curiosity. Like I just want to get my own answers. To answer your question, when I got back into the speaking game back in 2021, 22, I was listening to a podcast through the Speaker Lab, and there was a company on there called the Self-Publishing School. And their owner, Chandler Bolt, made a pretty bold statement. He said that he can get a book published in 90 days or less. And I was thinking to myself, huh, mind you, I didn't come in 2022 saying I'm going to write a book. And I heard this podcast in March of 2022. I was like, you know what? I like challenges, and I'm kind of curious if we can actually accomplish this. So once again, I open up my checkbook. I got my card out, my American Express out, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to swipe it to see what this program's about. And throughout the months of March and April and a little bit of May, I worked on my manuscript. Now, what I did was Greatness Beyond the Badge originally started off as the Invisible Law Enforcement Officer. That was the title of that presentation. So I kind of already had a foundation, so to speak, of something that I wanted to put in written format, but it wasn't until I listened to that podcast. So I kind of took that concept, but you still got to go through writing, actual putting the words on paper in a narrative form. It's a presentation, a keynote, anything that's probably over 10 minutes, you're not going to be able to write out every word. A book, you have to write out every word. So I spent the next 45 days within those 2 months just waking up every morning, going on Google Docs, and just transcribing it because I speak a lot faster, as you know, than I can type. So I did that every morning for 45 days. I ended up getting my manuscript done within that time period. I wanted to get about 30,000 words just so I can have, because I'm not a big book reader in general. So if I'm not a big book reader, I don't need to make the next person read the book that's big. So I was like, once I hit 30,000 words, I can send it. So I ended up doing that. I got with an editor, and there was one part of the book that my editor, she was like, you know what? I think you need to add a chapter on like goal setting. So that actually added about 2 to 3 weeks to the time. So between March, I'd worked on the manuscript, the editing, proofreading. By July 26th of that same year, I actually published Greatness Beyond the Badge. So it ended up being a little over 90 days, but it wasn't because of the company. It was because of me and the goals I wanted. So yes, I was able to self-publish my first book in July of 2022.
Wow. So you went from conceiving the idea to publishing in just over 90 days.
You got to. One of the things that I've been really good at is executing and implementing things that I learned. Because for me, I lose track because I do so many things. So I try to do things as soon as I think about them. So the book, I tell people, I have people that call me and they say, how'd you do it so fast? I said, because I was focused. I wanted to do it. And plus once you spend money on something, especially several grand, you don't want that several grand just to sit there. Like, you want to eventually get it back. And I've definitely made the money back I made the money back that same year with book sales, but it was literally, you're right. It was thought to publishing within that time frame. But I was determined, I was focused, I was able to push all my energy into that. And for most people, I think where they go wrong with or think about writing a book is they overthink the process. They're like, you know what? I want my book to be everything. The day I published my book, and I was told this by my speaking coach, he told me, he said, the day you publish it, you're going to think, man, I should have added something else. And he's right. You're always going to want to add more. But that's the cool part about publishing books. I see people publish a book every month. My speaking coach, I think he was publishing he had just finished publishing one right before I met him. And 6 months later, he was publishing another one. So if you do feel like your book or a book that you're thinking about writing isn't going to have enough, just write something, get it out there. That's the start. Because once you get the first one out, I'm thinking about writing another one right now. I just haven't sat down and focused on it, but it's definitely something that's very fulfilling. And it doesn't take as long as people would think. The hardest part is us overcoming the fact that it has to be perfect.
Wow. Yeah, and that's a topic too that I've been looking at a lot recently in terms of just the power of momentum, where you can just because we all get those ideas, those inspirations to do something, and sometimes too, if you don't act right away, that momentum will just fade. So it looked like you had that desire, and because you just acted right away, and like you said, you were focused. You had a book published in just a few months. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I tell people all the time, everybody has a story. Like, people sound like, I know when I say, it is impressive to do it in 4 months. People do it less than I do. Some people take 4 years, but I tell everybody, they're like, what am I going to write about? I said, whatever, just write about your life. Like, what do you like, why do you have to overthink the process? If you've been in this, my son, he's 10, he could write a book just based on things he's gone through. Like, and not saying he's gone through anything negative. He's just talking about all the good stuff he's gone through. But you know what I mean? Like, people would think that they have to have this magical topic, when I tell people one of the goals of a book or any message you're delivering is the impact you're going to have on others. Your story, even though you may think it's small and unimportant, or it's not as good as the next story, it will impact somebody. I promise you. When I include certain stories in my presentations, I don't know who it's going to impact, but I have people picking and choosing different stories. They're like, oh man, when you said this story, or you told us about this. Same thing with book writing. You've got to get your story out there. If one person buys your book and loves it, then it should be a win. Because I'll tell you right now, I haven't heard anybody become a millionaire off of book sales, but I have heard people have very deep intrinsic rewards from writing a book.
Okay. And another thing that you've done is you started a podcast called Leo First, which stands for Law Enforcement Officer First.
Yes. Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to do, and before I got back into the speaking game in 21, I actually started the podcast in 2020, and I didn't really know what direction I really wanted to go outside of humanizing law enforcement officers, meaning I wanted people to see another form of law enforcement, because a lot of times, and even when I was younger, all we really knew was the uniform. You see the uniform up and you just forget that person has a life past that. And that's in other industries too. You can say, and you might say, oh, this person's just an accountant. But outside of being an accountant, outside of being a law enforcement officer, you're a person. So the LEO for his podcast, it was designed to highlight people currently in law enforcement, people that are retired from law enforcement, even family, people that are just part of it, because once again, it's a stressful environment. And what I realize is that too many of us in our lives, in and outside of law enforcement, we try to handle obstacles on our own. That's not how life's meant to be. You have to go out there and realize that other people are struggling, and your message and things you can offer are available. So that's why I wanted to create that platform to give other law enforcement officers, current, active, even vendors that support law enforcement, a chance to talk about themselves and show that they're regular people that go to the grocery store, that have to use the bathroom, that have struggles. Because so many times we see people in certain settings and we assume that's who they are all the time. And that's far from the truth.
Wow. Okay. So in doing all those interviews and those episodes, I mean, what do you think's the biggest, the most important lesson you've learned with the podcast?
Everybody is going through something at different points of their lives. And fortunately, since they were on the podcast, they've overcome something. So for me, I always look at it as a overcoming something, like, I can't think of the word right now, but it's something that everybody has been able to show some level of resilience. So that's what I learned through the podcast, is that everybody has a story to tell and everybody's story is unique. It's literally them that have experience and they've overcome whatever. And a lot of people have gone through some bad times through different levels, whether it's professional, personal, whatever. And with the show, I learned that it's a great platform for anybody, for any pod. I mean, your podcast is perfect for stuff like that too. It's like, how do we help people showcase what they've been through, allow them to speak and use it almost as like a therapeutic type of release, but also encourage others to do right and be the best, because we all go through things. So me, with the podcast, I've learned that there's really good people everywhere in this world, and they're just waiting to be heard.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's so true, right? In any capacity, people just want to be heard and listened to, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, and then something else you have new coming up this year is you just created a course if people want to start a speaking career.
Yeah. So what I was mentioning to you earlier before we got into the show, going through the one program, the marketing program I went through, I did a testimonial for them because they understand the power of testimonies. And since that time, and even people, my friends and stuff, they continue to ask me, "Hey, how'd you go from being in law enforcement to becoming a professional speaker? How do you make money? How do you travel?" And I was like, you know what? Rather than me just tell people things sporadically, let me create an online course. So a couple of months ago, I actually created it last year, but I really just started to market it this year. It literally takes you from how to create a message, how to engage the audience, to what to look for when you're trying to get clients. And the course was really just designed on what I do. Now, do other people do different things? Of course. But I could tell you, I'm an active speaker. You go check out my social media, you check out my webpage, check out my YouTube, whatever it might be. I am in the game right now speaking, utilizing these same tactics and strategies. So the 6-week speaker is literally designed for anybody that's just thinking about getting into the speaking game, or someone that's been in it, that's just looking for a few tips or strategies to maybe help them get over a hump. So literally the program, it's online pro, it's 6 modules. It's literally something you can do in your car. You could do something at your house, whatever, self-paced. And it's just giving you things that I use today in 2024 and that I've used in the last couple of years to kind of elevate my speaking business.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Excellent. All right. And Michael, if people want to get in touch with you and find out more about your speaking program or hire you for an event or any of the other services you offer, what's the best way that they can do that?
Now, for my non-social media people that don't like social media, for example, they can go straight to my website, which is michaelaidler.com. You have to put that A in the middle. I haven't been able to buy the domain from the other person yet, so you have to put the A in the middle. But you can go on there, and there's a booking links on there, but also shows different things I speak about. Now, I will say my main focus in speaking is mental wellness and leadership in all industries. So if somebody's looking for that and they maybe look at some of my programs, don't see it, still reach out to me. And once again, I tailor things to organizations. So when I've spoken at like human resource conferences, I'm not going to sit there and give them law enforcement statistics or data. I'm going to give them things related to the human resource professional. So that's just an example. I mean, I've spoken at project management groups, I've spoken at construction groups, and I tailor certain parts of the presentation so I can relate to them. So if someone's looking to bring me in and they're not on social media, michaelalaidler.com has my booking form. Also, you can email me, michael@michaelalaidler.com. That will come directly to me. Now, if you're on social media, and I know that's where you and I met, my favorite platform, because it's extremely professional, it's business oriented, is LinkedIn. And that's just Michael Laidler. So it'd be @Michael Laidler. Same thing for my Instagram. And if you just want to see some of my content in video format, especially in multiple videos, other podcasts, my YouTube page is @Michael Laidler. So those are my main things. I do have Facebook, Michael A. Laidler, or Michael Laidler Leadership. And then I also have X, but I'm not really big on X. I only have like 40 people, but LinkedIn would probably be the number one thing I would recommend. I have going on 19,000 connections on there at this time.
Okay, excellent. We'll link all that in the show notes for everyone. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Enjoyed our conversation. And that's all the time we have for now. We will see you next time.